A concept that we emphasize a lot in my martial arts club is prepare to be prepared. Now, quite often in martial arts, they are taught in a very technique-based way. If the other person does this, you do that, which is great until the other person doesn't quite do that or doesn't quite do it properly, and now you're rifling through your filing system trying to find the right technique to fit exactly what they're doing. If you work from a more principle-based approach, then you are preparing to be prepared for whatever is thrown at you. And this, of course, applies to gaming as much as anything else. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth, we're looking at leveling up your GM skills. Hi, I'm Rob Poynton. Thanks for joining me today here on Dragon's Teeth, where we're following up on our last upload about public speaking by applying those skills directly to gaming now, and specifically to being a games master. GM, DM, keeper, warden, whatever you want to call it, you're the person who's running the game. Now, my own experience goes back quite a way. I had my own set of sort of fantasy rules before D&D come out, or at least before we could get hold of it. Once D&D came out, we quickly switched to that, of course, because surprisingly enough, it was a lot better. So I DM'd a lot of D&D, AD&D, and from there we went into Call of Cthulhu, Traveller, Star Trek role-playing game. Oh, a game called Flashing Blades, which I was delighted to see Paulie posted up a review of on one of her recent videos. I'll put the link into that below. Flashing Blades was a great swashbuckling RPG. It's nice to see that being mentioned again, and I imagine it's still available. If it is, then take a look. So following that, we played Vampire the Masquerade for a few years as well. And aside from that, I've run various war games, campaigns, skirmish games, all that kind of thing. Now, in more recent times, I haven't really done a lot of GMing, but I have played in quite a few number of games, both ongoing campaigns at the club or with friends, and of course at various conventions and that sort of thing. So over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, I've probably played with about 8 different GMs. And one thing you quickly find out, of course, is every GM has his or her or their own style. That, of course, is something you develop as you go along. But what I'm going to do today, hopefully, is give you some tips to help your games run more smoothly, and sometimes to look at any issues that may arise. Again, here's that preparing to be prepared. Because when you get any group of people together, even 4 or 5, and you're putting them in a kind of the free-ish environment of an RPG, you're never quite sure where they're going to go or what they're going to do. So something we'll talk about is this idea of preparing to be prepared. Of course, the most obvious aspect of this is, as a GM, you will have read the scenario, or you will have written the scenario, or at least you have some kind of idea and structure of what is going to happen during the course of play. There are games that are much more improvisational. That is not something I've directly had a lot of experience of, so I can't really talk to that so much. But normally, when we're playing a game, it's either a published scenario that we're using, or it's something that the GM has come up with themselves, or they've taken a scenario and they've modified it. So the first thing is you need to know what the story is, what it's about, what are the plot twists, who are the main characters, and what is the goal of the scenario for the player characters, of course, as well. And they can be widely different. They may even be conflicting with each other and everything else. But you need to have that broad structure and outline in place at the start if you're running that kind of game. I always find it's good to have this information to hand. So on a piece of paper. Another thing I'm looking at using as well, because I got one recently for another totally different project, was a small whiteboard. You know, so you can have it behind your screen or down the side. You can make some quick notes on it, You can rub them off. You can keep track of hit points and that sort of stuff on there as well. You've not got sheets of paper everywhere. Everything is on the board. I suppose I'm showing my age. These days, of course, you can have it on your phone or tablet or laptop as well. There's going to be some other things you need. More than likely, pens, paper, maps, handouts, dice, very important. Some people use figures, some don't. You might want to have some sort of mapping system out on the table. That could be like a wipe clean vinyl mat. We use those quite a lot. You might be using dungeon tiles, or it might completely be theatre of the mind. You've got no figures, no props at all. As long as you're prepared for whatever way you're going, then that's the main thing. And you need to think about the players as well. It's not just role-playing groups. I've been playing in bands for years, and we've even had incidents where I won't mention any names, but a bass player turned up for a gig and he'd forgotten his leads. So this is why other musicians carry spare leads. So if you are GMing a game, then bring some extra pencils, some dice, bits of paper, that kind of thing. Then hopefully everything is covered. So we've gone through our scenario, we've gone through our game, we've got an idea of the key points, of the structure, of the general outline of the adventure. I'd also build into that, before we start, a few what ifs. What if the players miss this important clue and they start veering off on this side track? Are there any particular points where the players might really get stuck or find that something is too difficult? Or are there things that they're going to steamroller through? As I say, you never know quite what to expect from players. But if you have a few general ideas, they don't have to be highly detailed. So maybe if they miss this clue and go there, well, maybe it pops up there in another form. You're ready to drop that in. Of course, as you gain experience as a GM, you'll learn to do this on the spot pretty much and improvise. But sometimes it's useful to have these things thought out a little bit in advance as well. Another big part of the preparation is the physical space you are playing in. And this is something you may have total control over if you're playing at home or around friends, for example, or you have zero control in at all if you're running a game at a convention, for example. So it's nice to be able to have some sort of agency over the surroundings. This is something I'm going to talk about more in a future upload, about developing an atmosphere for horror RPGs in particular. We can talk more about that then. But at the very least, you want to be sure that you've got seats for everyone, there's space at the table, you've got decent lighting, or at least atmospheric lighting. I remember us playing Vampire Masquerade by candlelight, which worked great until someone had to, they're holding their character sheet right up against the candlelight. So we sort of switched that to having the candles on just at certain times. You've got to be practical as well as atmospheric. So yeah, just make sure that your gaming area is accessible, everyone can get in and out, and also that there is enough space. Though having said that, I think gamers often spread out to the amount of space available. You could be sitting at a 30-foot ballroom table with 4 players, and each will have 5 foot of space, and there'll be character sheets and a phone and a can of drink and some food and the dice, So, well, it's nice to stretch out and have a bit of luxury, I suppose. But it's better to have that than the converse, where everyone is really crammed in next to each other, unless, of course, that forms part of the atmosphere of the game. The final part of preparation is that very first session, the 0 session. This is where you explain the background. Now again, this might be very brief. If it's a one-shot, it could be more detailed if you're running a campaign. This is where the players will create their characters. This is where you describe the setting before you actually get into the play. And of course, another very important part at this stage is safety or setting boundaries. Particularly if you're playing a horror type game or that sort of thing, we need to be sure that everyone is comfortable and on board with the limits of the game. From here, following the same format as our public speaking video, we move into the presentation stage, how we present our information. And the first thing that came up last time on that was the first of our E words, actually, engagement. I think I mentioned there, I have seen a game played, this was actually an online game, not something I was involved in, where the GM read everything out like this. So there's a screen here, and the GM, they're obviously looking down at their book and they're reading out this thing, and you go here and you go there. Yeah. There's no engagement with the players. It's a very monotone voice. You're not really creating an atmosphere. Now, again, sometimes that might be called for. That might be the atmosphere you want to put across. But the advice I gave before, if it's a large group or a small group, it doesn't matter, is you make eye contact with each of your players as you're describing. Now, maybe you're someone who can memorize huge chunks of text very quickly. Maybe you need to refer now and then, look down. Then in that case, take it a sentence at a time. So you're going across the bridge, and you find that a big sea monster comes up at the side. Have a little look down at the next sentence, then look to the next player. It's about 8 foot tall and it's got huge scaly claws and teeth, and you can work around like that. It's good anyway, sometimes, if you have a huge chunk of text, just to break it down a little bit. As I said, you want to get away from just that monotone, flat delivery, which is going to send players to sleep, not make them feel that they're part of an exciting adventure. And of course, we tie in all those other things we spoke about before: the speed of your voice, the cadence, the rhythm, the flow, the expression. Now, when it comes to RPGs, role playing, there it is in the name, we expect the players to role play as their characters, of course, but as the GM, you're also going to have to role play as well. And this often means speaking in the voice of an NPC or a creature or something similar. The question then comes up, how do you do this? It's a bit of a difficult one, because I have seen some GMs who use the same voice for every single character, and in my mind this was their character voice. So whether you're talking to it was a D&D thing, whether you're talking to a huge orc chieftain, or whether you're talking to Bill the barman in the local tavern, they all kind of spoke like this. Well, yes, I will get you a beer. Or, let me tell you about the ogres who, bless him, he was trying, but it didn't quite come across. The other side of that, of course, is the GM who ducks down behind the screen, comes up with a rubber mask on and goes, I tell you about the, goes almost LARP with it. I would suggest, unless you're very good at accents, leave that aside. Maybe you're into Amdram or something like that, then by all means go for it. So how then do you differentiate between the characters? Well, you think about that idea as we spoke with your own voice, the rhythm of your speech, the cadence, the expression. Perhaps there are certain inflections, perhaps slight accents, but don't overdo it. I find when I'm writing, let's take, for example, I had a Scottish character in one of my stories. So I could write in a kind of phonetic Scottish accent, and it would be very awfully stereotyped. Och, now, new, ye, and all that sort of thing. I never like that kind of phonetic writing when I've seen it. But if you listen to how someone from Glasgow speaks, for example, I've got a couple of Glaswegian friends, then there's certain little phrases, a little bit like people from the East End say, you know what I mean? All right. So you see, you find that people often put these little phrases in. So use those for your characters. If we go back to that orc, perhaps he says, you know what I mean? Or that kind of thing quite a lot. I'm sure you can find something better than that. But that way, each character starts to develop their own voice that doesn't rely so much on you putting on a sort of a comedy pirate accent. Now, again, one thing we mentioned about the public speaking is you've got your engagement, you've got your eye contact going, you're in a nice flow, and then your eyes will alight on someone who sat there with their arms crossed, looking totally bored and disinterested. You're much less likely to find that in an RPG group. Now, we have to bear in mind, of course, that everyone is different in social situations. People communicate in different ways. So, of course, we have to be accepting of that. I would like to imagine in an RPG session, everyone is there because they enjoy RPGs. So I have heard, I think it was Matt Sanderson told a story about that. It sounded like someone was dragged in to play an RPG that he was running against their will and really didn't want to be there. Very rare. Most people are going to engage, but do be aware that people engage in different ways. Some people are much more forward, some people are more laid back. You know, take all that into account. What I think is a good thing is, especially if you're asking, what do you do now? So we've gone over that bridge, the big monster has crept out, what do you do now? Sometimes if you sit back, you'll find that the same players answer all the time. The more forward ones will answer for everyone else, which is okay, but I sometimes think then not everyone is getting a fair say. So a good idea is just to, what do you do? What do you do? Just go around the group, each in turn. What would you like to do? What would you like to do? That way everyone gets some input, everyone can make a suggestion, and of course depending on the urgency of the situation, you might even give the group a little bit of time to talk about what they're going to do, or even if it's an immediate action now, at least everyone gets a say in what they're going to do. And of course, when you are describing scenes, whether that is a panoramic view, whether it's a small 10 by 10 cell in a dungeon, or whether it's something horrible coming out of the water, be precise, be concise. Give the players the information that they need to see what's going on, but also don't give them too much. You know, some things you might not notice at first. I would suggest, for example, if you're going over a bridge and a huge monster comes out at the other side, you're not going to notice that those flowers on the other bank, are they daffodils? I think they're daffodils. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are. You know, you've got a huge deep one coming towards you. So describe what they see immediately, but then the other writing tip is involve all the senses. What do they hear? What are they feeling in terms of, oh, it feels like seaweed underfoot, feels very slippery. Oh, I can smell sort of damp rot in the air. You know, you bring in all the senses. And sometimes, of course, those senses are clues as to what might be around the corner or all sorts of things. So don't just stick to that. I've seen scenarios, I think particularly some of the older scenarios back in the day were very much, it's a 10 by 10 room, there are 3 bunk beds, there is a chest in the corner. Is there water running down the walls? Is there a patch of mould? Is there a strange shape in one of these bunk beds? You know, there was very little on atmosphere. It was all about pure visual description. I think that's changed a lot now. And I think if you take that approach, then the scenario, the experience becomes much richer for the players. That really brings us into our content then, and now the game is underway. We're rolling along and things are happening. To me, when you're playing, there are 3 stages we can look at. The first stage is what I call the social or the chat. Everyone turns up, people are getting their stuff out, putting it on the table, getting ready, and people start to chat. Oh, did you see that thing on Netflix the other night? Did you see it? Oh yeah, da 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 da. So you get that social side of it, which is great. And I generally find that naturally settles down anyway. But it might be at some point as GM, you need to say, look, we've only got a couple of hours. Let's start now, shall we? Is everyone ready? Okay, let's go. The game begins. Once we're into the next stage, I call the game chat. Now, this is for where people can be asking questions about what is going on. They can be asking questions relating to their character or to the game mechanics. So usually in this, there's not much actually happening in the game yet. They might be sitting around or they might be going somewhere on a journey, and one character say, oh, at what level do I get the spell where I can talk to the animals or that kind of thing? So, you know, as a GM, you can answer that, of course. This is part of the in-game chat, if you like. We're not talking about something we saw yesterday or a book we read. It relates to the game. That's fine. That's good. And this is where, of course, as a GM, you start bringing in the descriptions and the atmosphere and the general feel of the setting. And I think the more vivid you make the setting, the less distractions you'll get in terms of people wanting to come out of that. From there, we get into what I call the action part. Now we've got something happening. Now there's the beastie has crawled out, someone's kicked in the door and 4 ogres rush in, or you see a flying thing overhead, or you enter through the airlock and an alien comes out, all that sort of thing. So this is the time now when the intensity of the play should pick up. This for me is, and I've seen it happen from time to time, this is the worst point for someone to then say, oh, that reminds me of, oh, what was that thing in that film? It was, oh, or someone says, what level do I get to do? You know, those are not questions for that time. The dialogue now, or the interaction between the GM and the players, should become quite short and concise, but again, precise. What are you going to do? I'm going to take 3 steps back, I'm going to draw my laser blaster, and I'm going to open fire. What are you going to do? I'm going to try and squeeze through that air vent and see if I can wriggle away. You know, it should be down to that. Then, of course, you get into your dice rolls, or however you're resolving the action. Once you come out of that, and the situation is resolved, or one way or the other, or it's finished, then you can slow the pace back down again. And now the players can go, whoa, that was close. Oh, wow, did you see that? I shot him right in the chest there and all that green blood came out. You know, you can get into that. I think it's still good at this stage if they're keeping in character. You still don't then want to go into, oh, yes, that reminds me of. But, you know, the intensity eases off a little bit. And of course, now your players start asking things like, how do I fix this huge wound in my side? Another couple of important aspects. First is to let the players play. Quite a while back now, I do remember being involved in a game where the GM liked to say things like, okay, so you're going down the dungeon corridor and you turn a corner and you're confronted by a zombie. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to draw your sword and you're going to bring your shield up and you're going to hack away. And if it was, hey, hang on a minute, hang on. I'm the player character. I'll let you know what I'm doing. You know, I think he liked to almost run the whole game so it went the correct way. This is another issue. You have your scenario. Perhaps it's something you've written yourself. So you've worked all this out and you've got A to B to C to D. And we get to B and the players want to go to J. No, you can't do that. You're going to break the scenario. It's going to, you know, you have to make a decision at some point of how much you're going to let go. This, again, is very much for me like being in a band where you might take some music in and you start playing and you jam it a bit. Then someone goes, oh, how about if we try this? Now, it might not be any good. It might be fantastic, just what the song needs. So, as a musician, you can say yes or no, I suppose. As a GM, you can't just suddenly stop the game and say, no, let's back up, let's start the song again, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, you're in a tavern and a man with an eye patch comes up to you. You know, you've got to be able to work with that on the spot. This then takes us into another area, which again I've seen just once or twice, very rare, where a GM will start punishing the players for doing it wrong. You're not doing the scenario right. Okay, suddenly a dragon appears and huge burst of fire comes down the corridor. You'll need to save versus death, the end. Now, to be fair, I did use that once myself. It was to end the Vampire Masquerade campaign, but that was partly because the players made, I still think to this day, was, or one player in particular, such an amazingly stupid decision. Why on earth would you do that in that situation? And it sort of ended with, I couldn't really see a way out of it. Okay, the gangrels tear you apart. You don't want to be torn apart by the gangrels. Makes your eyes water, by the way. So sometimes maybe you just have to do that. You know, if a player is being particularly obtuse. But as a general rule, don't worry if the players aren't getting it right. If the scenario turns out to be too difficult for them, then ease things back a little bit. If they're breezing through it easily, then, you know, you can bring things up a little bit as well. It should be easy in any system. I think Call of Cthulhu, Mothership, which I'm just looking at now, D&D, it should be very easy on the fly just to buff up some hit points or health points a little bit, or just to take some down, just to suit the level of not necessarily the characters, but the players. Because one thing you have to remember quite often is, let's say I'm playing a 10th level wizard. His intelligence is far greater than mine. So that's something a GM has to bear in mind when the player is playing that character. Oh, this also ties into another question I heard the other day on, I think it's Between Two Cairns podcast, which is an excellent RPG podcast, by the way. The question was, as a GM, should you roll your dice in secret or out in the open? My answer is yes or no. I think sometimes rolling behind the screen or in secret allows you to influence the game a little bit, as we said before. If it's a real struggle for the players, then maybe that wasn't a critical hit I rolled there from the ogre. We'll just let them off a little bit, or vice versa. And of course, rolling in secret should be a major part of any GM's armoury, not necessarily in combat, but just every now and again you say to a player, what's your listen skill? And they say, 58, and you roll a dice behind the screen and go, right, okay. So, that's just a nice way to bring in that extra tension. The other side of it is if you roll the dice in the open, again, that can create tension, because especially in a tense moment in combat, I'm going to roll the dice out hit. What have we got? And everyone round the table, oh no, it's a hit. So, you can use that to increase tension as well. Generally speaking, I sort of sit somewhere in between the two. Most of the rolls I tend to do behind the screen. Well, I suppose there's another question there. Should you use the screen or not? Personally, I always like to, because then I can put my maps and plans and charts on the table, and I have the screen here. Now, I'm not going to use one of these 4-foot tall ones like this, like a sort of almost like a battlements set up in front of me. What I often like to do is have a smaller screen, just maybe off to the side a bit, and that will have all my references there, so I can still operate here and take notes and do other things out in the open, so to speak. Again, this will depend on your setting, on the table space, what sort of game you're running, and everything else. But of course, having the screen does mean you've got all your tables and charts to hand, and you're not having to do that thing of, oh, hang on, I've got the 5th supplement here, it's here somewhere. I guess that goes back to our preparation. Should have mentioned that at the start as well. Have all your tables and charts that you need printed out on a screen, or at least on a sheet of paper, or ready on your phone or tablet. I think that covers most things, or at least most things that I've experienced. I have heard of the difficult player situation. It's not something I've encountered myself. In all my years teaching martial arts, I've only encountered it twice, maybe 3 times in that, because again, generally people who come along to join in with something are there because they want to join in with something. There's that, what do they call it in films or books, the willing suspension of disbelief. So people are there because they want to be part of this experience, or they want to learn, or whatever it is, whatever their reasons for being there, they're there because they want to be. But it can arise, of course, I guess particularly around arguments over rules or rulings. Most rules in RPG systems I've played are pretty clear. If they're not, then push comes to shove, you roll the dice. 1 to 3, 4 to 6, done. We'll make a note of that. Then as a GM, you either go away and you tweak that rule, or you take it out completely, or whatever, you adjust. In the heat of the moment, a quick dice roll will solve most things. I think where you're more likely to get arguments is not over rules, but rulings. As a GM, you have to be consistent. If one player falls down a 100-foot cliff but doesn't sustain any damage at all, because you like that player, you like that character, you want to help them a little bit, and another player falls I don't know, off a wall or something and is killed because maybe you don't like that character so much, then that's inconsistent. Barring extreme dice rolls, of course, if people roll fumbles and crits, maybe. But whatever the rules of your game world are, they need to be consistent. He says again, unless, of course, that is part of that world. There are scenarios where you might be going between dimensions or some sort of behaviour like that, where the rules could possibly be changing every 5 minutes. That's fine, but generally speaking, we like to know that if I fall off a 3-foot wall, the worst I'm going to get is a sprained ankle, not a broken neck. So I think if you're consistent in your rulings and you can at least explain them, then that will go a long way, if not the whole way, in heading off any arguments about rules and rulings. And finally, of course, remember, RPGs, role-playing games, games equals fun. That's why we play games, for fun. It might be a totally horrific scenario, or you might be RPGing a nice stroll through a summer's day in the Shire. Whichever. That's the tone of your game and your players. That's up to you and them to decide. But it should be fun. So never lose sight of that. This is a fun experience where a group of people are coming together to create this story. And that, of course, includes the GM, who quite often be creating this whole world. If you're running your own campaign, for example, and creating the setting and everything else, then it's a real nice opportunity to create this world for other people to come in and join in on and see how they develop your narrative as well. It's not you versus them. This is a shared experience between the whole group who come together to create and develop this story, this narrative, and have a bit of fun and adventure, maybe the odd spot of horror even on the way. All right, that's it for today. Next time, I'm going to go through the same process for players. And then after that, as I mentioned earlier, I will put up something on developing atmosphere, creating a nice atmosphere, a horrible atmosphere for horror RPGs. So to make sure you catch both of those and all the other great content we've got coming up, please do click the subscribe button below. Please do like and share. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed so far. And of course, I'm always interested to hear your thoughts, your views, your experiences, any good tips you've got for GMs. Have you had any difficult players in the past? How did you deal with those? And what was your best experience as a GM? I think that would be an interesting thing to hear as well. All right, thanks again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.